You think Christopher Columbus discovered America? He didn't. He never set foot on the mainland. He died certain he'd found a shortcut to Asia, and the continent isn't even named after him. Most people know the simple version. In the 1480s, Columbus went to Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon to ask them to fund a sea route to Asia. Later in 1492, the Queen finally agreed to support him. The crown promised him the title of admiral and a percentage of any riches he found. In 1492, Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and discovered America, opening the door to European settlements of the New World. Simple, clean, and taught in almost every school on the continent that carries someone else's name. Here's what actually happened. In 1492, Columbus landed in the Bahamas, then Cuba and Hispaniola. Over 3 more voyages, he explored the Caribbean and eventually touched the coasts of South and Central America, but he never once set foot on the mainland of North America. And until the day he died in 1506, Columbus insisted he had reached islands off the coast of Asia, the Indies. He never accepted, or perhaps never realized, that he had found something Europe didn't know existed. Meanwhile, an Italian explorer and mapmaker named Amerigo Vespucci sailed the coast of South America a few years later. In a series of widely circulated letters, published across Europe under titles like Mundus Novus, New World, Vespucci made the claim Columbus never did, that this wasn't Asia at all. It was an entirely separate continent, previously unknown. In 15,007, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller was compiling a new map of the world. Convinced by Vespucci's account, he did something remarkable. He labeled the new continent America, a Latin version of Vespucci's first name. That map, the only surviving copy of which now sits in the Library of Congress, is sometimes called America's birth certificate. It's the very first document in history where the word America appears. But here's where actual historians start to disagree. The mainstream account credits Vespucci because his letters clearly described a separate continent, a genuine leap in understanding that Columbus never made. But a number of historians have challenged this directly. Some scholars argue the letters attributed to Vespucci may have exaggerated his voyages, or that he wasn't even present on the earliest expedition he claimed to have joined, in 1497. There's even a hint that Waldseemüller himself had doubts. In his later maps, from 1513 and 1516, he quietly removed the name America altogether, and never fully explained why. So depending which historian you ask, Vespucci is either the man who understood something Columbus never did, or a self-promoter who got credit for a realization that wasn't entirely his own. There's even a third, much smaller theory floating around, that the name doesn't come from Vespucci at all, but from a Bristol merchant named Richard Amerigo, who is recorded funding English fishing voyages to Newfoundland years before Waldseemüller's map. Almost no mainstream historian accepts this version. The documentary evidence overwhelmingly points to Vespucci, but it's a reminder of just how contested this seemingly simple question actually is. And that's still not the deepest layer of this story, because nearly 500 years before Columbus ever set sail, Norse explorers had already crossed the Atlantic and landed in North America. Around the year 1021, a date confirmed in 2021 by scientists using tree ring analysis published in the journal Nature, a Norse expedition, likely led by Leif Erikson, built a settlement at a place now called Lance Oak Meadows on the northern tip of Newfoundland. Excavated starting in 1960, the site is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it remains the only confirmed Norse settlement anywhere in North America. The Norse called the land Vinland, likely meaning meadowland, according to the archaeologists who've studied it, though some still translate it as wineland. Icelandic sagas, written down 2 centuries later, describe the settlers encountering people they called Skraelings, the indigenous inhabitants of the region, and record both trade and violent conflict between the 2 groups. Combined with the sheer distance back to their base in Greenland, that conflict appears to have made the outpost unsustainable. Within a decade, the Norse abandoned it for good, and Europe wouldn't return to these shores for almost 500 years. And underneath all of it, Columbus, Vespucci, even the Norse, there's a layer that rarely makes it into the naming debate at all. People had already been living across the Americas for at least 15,000 years before any European arrived. By the time Columbus landed in the Caribbean, the Aztec and Maya had built cities of stone temples and causeways in Central America. The Inca controlled a mountain empire stretching thousands of miles down the spine of South America. And in what's now Illinois, the city of Cahokia had once housed more people than London did at the same period in history. Entire civilizations, cities, and trade networks existed on this continent long before anyone in Europe knew it was there to be discovered. So who really discovered America? Not Columbus. He never even knew what he'd found. Not really Vespucci either. Credited more for good marketing than for being first. Not even the Norse, who arrived 500 years earlier and still weren't the first people to see this land. The truth is, the name America is a 500-year-old accident of publicity, stamped onto a continent that never needed discovering in the first place.